China is driving the world's economy in large part now. Several observers, Jim Chanos for one, says it's a huge bubble, 1,000 times the size of Dubai. Jim Rogers says Jim Chanos doesn't know what he's talking about. Our guest today, Marc Faber, is going to help us sort it out. Marc, welcome.
I also don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, don't admit that.
Okay.
Pretend you know what you're talking about. So, Marc, what is going on in China?
Well, basically, it is to some extent true that we have a credit bubble. Credit has been growing at an annual rate of 30%, and they had a huge stimulus package and so forth. But you understand, when you look at credit, you always have to look at from where you start. If you start out with rapid credit growth from a debt to GDP of, say, 100%, is a different story than if you start from a debt to GDP of 600%, as we have in the United States, if we include Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So basically, I think, yeah, they have excesses, they have some malinvestments, there is oversupply in some industries and so forth. But you understand, at least in China with credit, they do something. They build railroads and roads and bridges and infrastructure and education and so forth and so on. In the United States, credit is mostly used for consumption, and that's a huge difference, whether you use credit to make capital investments, they can be infrastructures, education, R&D, and so forth, or you use it just to buy McDonald's hamburgers.
Or SUVs. Or
yes, precisely, made in China or in Japan.
So how about Dubai, though? Dubai built infrastructure. They built the tallest building in the world. It just turns out that nobody's living in it and nobody wants to live in it and so forth.
Well, there were some excesses, but you have also to see that Dubai has done in many sectors a good job. I mean, they have one of the most efficient airline in the world, Emirates. They have a highly efficient airport. They have a very well-developed infrastructure. They have a reasonably good legal system and so forth. It's just that there were excesses, and that people have to see. The Federal Reserve maintains that there has been no inflation in the United States, which is not quite correct. But what the monetary policies of the U.S. did is to create excessive consumption in the U.S., leading to a rising trade deficit and current account deficit in the U.S., and a huge shift of money overseas, which then inflated and created bubbles overseas.
So going back to China, stocks have recovered.
Yes.
Certainly the economy seems to be recovering on a tear. Again, given the fact that some people are predicting that it's just all a house of cards that's going to collapse, are you worried about that?
Yes, I'm worried about it, and I'm sure that Jim will be right one day. In other words, Jim Chanos. But I know him very well. He's a friend of mine, hyper smart, and very good. But sometimes until his ideas work out, it can take half a year, it can take 3 years, you know. So it's very difficult to pinpoint a day when China will implode. I don't think it will happen right away.
When China implodes.
I'll let you know.
Oh, good. And will that totally lay waste to the rest of the world?
Not entirely, but it will have a deep impact on commodity prices and obviously on the surrounding Asian economies, because you have to see one thing. Today, China is the bigger customer for many countries than the United States. Exports from Brazil to China and from Australia to China are larger than to the United States. So, of course, it will have an impact on the rest of the emerging world.
Thank you, Marc.